Hello. Welcome to Lund's Stadsbibliotek and the seminar Library of Things and Other Models for Sustainable Home Furnishings. I want to take this opportunity to thank Lund's Stadsbibliotek because we get to be here in this wonderful place. I don't know if you've seen the green behind you. It's really nice of them to let us be here today. Hello to all of you in the public here with us today, and hello to you that are with us in the digital audience. This is the second stop on a 3-day tour by train where Mistra Sustainable Consumption is presenting 4 years of research on how more sustainable niche practices for vacationing, food, and home furnishings can be scaled up and become more common. The research program has brought together researchers, businesses, policymakers, NGOs, and other societal partners to explore business models, policy mechanisms, and consumer behaviors that can help bring current niche practices into the mainstream. We're too few people that are doing enough, so we need to scale it up to become more mainstream. Tonight, the event is organized together with Circle Center Lund. This seminar will be held completely in English. It is streaming live on Mistra Sustainable Consumption's websites, and it is being recorded. If you're a bit camera shy for any reason and you don't want to be in the picture, you can sit towards the back or to the sides, but we don't think anybody is visible except for the speakers this evening. For those of you who are social media savvy, please tag along on the hashtag MSCTalkTurné. My name is Erica Dawn Egan. I am a sustainability strategist at KTH Sustainability Office, and I am pleased to be guiding us through the next 1.5 hours of presentations and discussions. We're not taking any breaks. We have too much important things to say. So this evening, we'll be learning from researchers and practitioners on new sustainable models for buying, sharing, owning, renting, and repairing things in our homes. There's a lot of alternatives. Now, on to the good part. One of the fastest growing consumption areas in Sweden is the furnishings, fittings, household articles, and maintenance sector. Despite the growing importance of furnishing consumption for the consumer and for the Swedish economy, the sector has received relatively little attention in research linked to its environmental and climate impacts. Until now. I'd like to welcome our first speakers to the scene. Oksana Montt, professor in Sustainable Consumption Governance and research coordinator at the International Institute for Industrial Environmental Economics at Lund University. I got it all in.
Yes, perfect. Hello.
As well as Annika Karlsson-Kanyama, senior consultant at Ecoloop. You'll be coming up as when Oksana is done, and docent in industrial ecology at KTH. Annika and Oksana have looked into the environmental impacts and potential benefits of sustainable furnishing practices. They're all yours.
Thank you very much. Hello again. I'm Oksana Montt, a professor in Sustainable Consumption Governance at Lund University. And today I will be talking about environmental impacts and also social practices, what all of us can do about this. But I want to start very early back by reminding that we're all locked in the linear economy. We are really living in an economy where resources are going very fast through our society. We are extracting, producing, consuming, and then spitting them back on landfills or into the air or into the water. So what can we do about this? One solution is the circular economy. What can we learn from nature, from natural cycles, and how can we design our production and consumption systems to also create our systems of production and consumption in similar ways? In our Mistra Sustainable Consumption program, we asked ourselves this question, and then we looked at not maybe very obvious sector interior design, where we look at furniture and consumption. And the question is, we usually hear that circular economy, then we think about heavy production, machinery, processes, but here we look at the actual consumption sector, something that we all have at home. And then the critical question, why we are looking at these products, why are they so important? And what we realized is that indeed, these products are very important. In Sweden, we produce furniture for 23 billion kronors, and we pollute 150,000 CO2 ton equivalent. So furniture also leads to emissions. When we look at how we use the furniture, the biggest problem with furniture is not actually emissions during its use phase, as with many products that use electricity, water, but that it's actually a bulky product. We use it for a long time compared to many other products, but then we have really trouble disposing them off. They fill up landfills really quickly, and we are also quickly running out of landfill space. And then when we look at how we use the furniture, then we see that it's the function of furniture is becoming obsolete relatively quickly. There is also aesthetics and fashion. So we also see a trend that we are in the fashion, in furniture sector, we are borrowing from fast fashion, from clothing sector, and then we are also introducing this even seasonal furniture. And then also for many, we are all living kind of quite fluid lives, or both in work and at home. So a lot of furniture has been disposed when we relocate. And then also when we look at the textiles, home textiles, we collected 10 billion tons of furniture and textiles per year, and then out of this we burn 80 to 90%, and then only 10 to 20% get recycled. And Swedish EPA calculated that 60% of this furniture and home textiles can actually be reused. They are in functional shape and form and can be easily reused through second-hand or upcycling. So then the question is also, here is also very similar numbers for textiles. If we collect 74,000 tons in Sweden, then we are reusing only 3,000 tons. And then a lot of this 74,000 tons can be actually reused through recycling and reuse through second-hand. So what can we, each and every one of us, can do with our furniture and with home textiles? Of course, we can use what we have for longer time. We can use more often. We can then buy second-hand, and there is different ways. One can buy in the second-hand shops or charity shops or on auction, depending on the price tag of what you're looking for. We can also repair and upcycle ourselves, and there are also, now we see emerging different models for how we can all learn how to repair furniture, how to upholster furniture, and so on. Then another way is to get access. Maybe some furniture for special events, we don't need to own it, but we need to have the opportunity to be able to access the furniture through leasing, through hiring, through borrowing from our neighbors. And then, of course, we can support sustainable production. And we see also in the past 5 years, we see many emerging producers who are recycling, upcycling furniture. They are offering different extended services for cleaning, for example, furniture, cleaning home textiles. So we can support also these new business models and new businesses. And then we can try to live sustainably, meaning smaller living in smaller spaces or less furniture, buying more durable furniture we want to buy, or supporting different business models that are more sustainable. And then now I would like to give the word to Annika, who will talk about numbers, what these different business models can give us.
Yeah, I'm the guy. No, sorry. I'm the lady who made the calculations. Okay. So we made a lot of calculations in this research program, and we compared the different things, among these home furnishings, whether new stuff and repairing, renting, second-hand goods, and this is a graph showing the the greenhouse gas emissions per crown. We use per crown because it's easy to correlate with expenditures. If you read the reports, you can find it per piece or per kilo if you want to, but this is per crown. And as you can see, the lowest impact comes from second-hand goods. And of course, this is not so hard to imagine. I mean, you take your old chair to the second-hand shop and they brush off the dust and then they put it in the shop and somebody buy it, So the only greenhouse gas emissions is emitted from storing it and at the retail. So of course, it's but you can see it's a lot. It's really a lot more climate friendly than to buy a new carpet, for example. We also looked at repairing, and repairing, these numbers in repairing are very rough. They also contain the numbers for repairing cars or trucks, for example. And it depends, of course. We couldn't find any better number. But, of course, this became a bit higher than some of the stuff that were new. But I think this rather high number for repairing is because it's not it's not only repairing home furnishings, it's also repairing a lot of other things that require much further work. And of course, repairing can mean a lot of things. Maybe you redo the whole thing, or you just paint something and so on. So it can mean a lot of things. We looked at renting also, and the statistics for renting is also quite rough. So renting here includes renting cars and so on, but it's the only one available. But anyway, having these numbers, you can be sure that second-hand goods, of course, is better than anything new you can buy and anything that we made calculations of in the program. And we also looked at the costs, if you take the money that people spend on home furnishings and then make a scenario. They have to buy some things new, like dish rugs, for example. You can't buy that second-hand. That won't be very fresh. But all the other stuff, all the other money that people spend on home furnishings, we assume that you spend most of them on second-hand goods, then you get much more stuff, of course, because second-hand goods is cheaper. But then you spend some of it on repairing, and then you use a lot of your money, because repairing something can be more expensive than buying a new one, which is also, it's a flawed situation. It shouldn't be like that, but that's a fact. We looked at renting also, but that's not a possibility for households, because the only thing that we could rent was some furniture with very expensive brands. And when we calculated the amount of crowns used by a household for 1 year for home furnishings, they could rent a table of that label. That's it. An apartment with a table, very fancy table, but still, it's not a possibility, clearly, not today. Anyway, in this scenario, this is my last slide also, I have 5 minutes. In this scenario, we imagine that the average person of today, you can see that to the left, and the average person of tomorrow, that most of the money for home furnishings were shifted towards buying some second-hand goods and some repairing. And the assumption was that you have just the same number of goods before and after. And as you can see, the emissions per year in kilos, they became lower quite drastically, and it's the same for our other examples, single men and single women and so on. So you can do a lot, Of course, in the future, we cannot always only buy second-hand goods, because, as Oksana was saying, not everything can be used again. But of course, something of what we use can be repaired. But of course, the cost of repairs has to come down, because now it's so expensive most of the time. It's not an option for households, actually. So this is something that has to be changed. And also the renting. Renting is just high market things now. You can't rent IKEA furniture, for example, if that is going to be an option. And with that, I would like to say thank you from Oksana and me, and I think we kept more or less to the schedule.
I'm impressed. You did good. Well done. Thank you, Oksana and Annika. And we will now go forward in the program. We will now turn our focus to sustainable business models. Please welcome Heather Schoonover, PhD candidate at Lund University, and Matthias Lerner, researcher at Lund University and also at the International Institute of Industrial Environmental Economics. Heather and Matthias, you will be addressing the question, what will the next generation of successful businesses make their money from?
Yeah, thank you very much. So we've already heard that there's a bunch of different practices or behaviors, consumption behaviors that are available that would significantly reduce the environmental footprint of how we consume furniture. Now, of course, there need to be supporting business models that facilitate and ideally even improve and innovate these types of behaviors. And so we've also looked into various business models, types of business models, and what they mean in practice in order to support sustainable consumption in furniture and textiles. And no, that was the wrong direction. There we go. To simplify it a little bit, and also because it's quite powerful, we decided now to explain or illustrate the possibility for sustainable business models by adopting the circular economy framework, by adopting to some degree the work of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, for example, in describing a sustainable economy and sustainable business models in circular loops, in resource loops, where loops can be very small, basically with stuff remaining where it is, shifting function or moving very small distances, to going into bigger loops where service providers are involved, and then manufacturers are involved again, or even raw material providers are involved again. But the underlying idea is always to not, as Oksana pointed out in the beginning, to come away from the input-output linear model that uses a lot of resources and produces a lot of waste, and instead circulate resources. And so the available business models or types of business models for these different loops are in the closest knit circle would be to maintain and prolong, and then the next one would be to reuse and redistribute. Further out is refurbish and remanufacture, and then the last one is recycle. And the innermost is the most sustainable one, and then towards the outside it becomes less and less sustainable, but still circular in an ideal world. And I'm going to quickly introduce business models or ideas for business models more or less tested for the innermost circle, which is to maintain and prolong. So that contains maintenance and repair, meaning, of course, then on the one hand, you, and in a way, I will include durability as well here. So you purchase, or the business model is you sell durable, lasting goods that also can so that are both preserved well and ideally also serve several functions, or can be find use in your household over a long period of time, and that also can be repaired easily and are made of materials and in ways that make repairing easier. And that also introduces the design aspect of this idea of business model. That means that already when you design a certain piece of furniture, you think about how it can be designed in order to prolong its lifetime. For example, by thinking about how you can design it in a way that it can be easily repaired, how it can be disassembled and reassembled, for example. Many know that moving furniture means that you partly destruct it, but simply by taking it apart and trying to put it back together again. So that there you have a design element. Modularity is, of course, a factor in it. Many of you know this type of chairs, and they can grow with the child, or in an extreme case, even to your adult age, if you want to. And last not least, timelessness, of course. This is incredibly true when it comes to fashion, but more and more also when it comes to furniture and interior design, that goods are not changed because of their because they're not useful anymore, but because they're not trendy anymore. And so there is a lot to be gained there. To introduce the next type of business models, I'm handing over to Heather.
Great. So the next most desirable sort of business models would be those that facilitate reuse and redistribution. So in this case, you're taking a product in its current form and essentially passing it along to someone else. And there's a number of different ways companies can do that. We already heard Annika mentioned rental, so rental, leasing, sharing, subscription, all of those, where again, you're paying for access rather than ownership. And then companies are making their money from, say, monthly subscription fees rather than selling products. And I think we are starting to see companies with lower price points. I know IKEA is piloting some rental and also some other companies in other countries with the price of rental goods coming down a bit. Another is to take things back. So companies will either take them back or in some cases buy them back when you no longer have a use for them, and then they can either resell them, or if a product is part of a rental system, they can rent it out again. So it's facilitating the end of life, making sure the companies can take it back. There's also some really interesting service platforms, some of which will match up essentially people who have furniture and people who need furniture. So this can be for personal use, say like a neighborhood platform where you say, hey, I've got a spare ladder, I need to borrow a ladder. Also now for companies. For example, Off to Off is a company that's worked with Malmö Stad to sort of inventory all of the furniture they have. And then if one department is getting rid of something, another can say, oh, actually, I need that. So kind of doing the inventory management piece and making sure things get passed around. There's also platforms that take this a step further and help with interior design. So they'll come into, say, an office building and look at, okay, what furniture do you have? What can you reuse as is? What maybe needs to be refurbished? And then we can refurbish it for you and kind of create this whole new office space in a way that maximizes secondhand and reused furniture. Then, of course, secondhand sales. This is nothing new. We've been buying secondhand from stores, from Blocket, but there's some really innovative models coming, one of which is Retuna, which is up near Eskilstuna. Eva Svensson is here, who helped start Retuna. It looks like a traditional shopping mall. It's got 14 stores with a bunch of home furnishings, books, electronics, bikes, you name it, but it's all secondhand, and it's all sourced from the municipal waste facility. So if you have a chance to get up there, please do. Super, super cool business model, and very innovative for secondhand. The next loop is refurbish and remanufacture. So in this case, you are taking the product apart to some extent. So refurbish would mean maybe you're refinishing a table or reupholstering a chair. Remanufacturing is a bit more substantial. You're basically breaking things down and reassembling them like new. And then upcycling, you're making something new out of an existing product. So maybe you have an extra wooden door and you decide to turn that into your dining room table. And here companies can either sell products that are refurbished or remanufactured or upcycled, or can offer services. So I know there's one company where if you buy chairs from them, as long as you own the chair, they will refurbish it for free. So if you decide the couch you bought in the 70s maybe isn't so trendy or is maybe wearing out, they will refurbish it as part of the sales package. And then finally, the outermost loop is, of course, producing and buying things from recycled materials. And recycling here, you're actually breaking things down to the material level, so sort of downcycling. But there are a number of companies that make products from recycled materials. I thought this was particularly interesting. It's a Dutch company that makes mattresses, among other things. They use very few materials. They don't use any glue, so they're designed to be recycled. And then they have a QR code, which says both what is in the product and gives consumers information as to how they send it back. So maybe in 20 years, you don't want your mattress. You look this thing up, and they're facilitating recycling, because they say recycling is only good if people actually send things for recycling. So they're helping with that as well. I will hand it to Matthias for the final slide.
Yes, and I'm basically only left with saying thanks for listening from both Heather and me, and pointing out that if you want to know more about what we just presented very briefly, we've, among others, published 2 reports that are available on the homepage. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Heather and Matthias. You mentioned Retuna.
Yeah.
Do we have someone here from Retuna?
Yes.
Okay, see that hand? If you have questions and want to know more, find her later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have to move forward. So we're going to move from business models to civil society. Our next speaker is Mikael Klintman, professor of sociology at Lund University. Michael, welcome. Please tell us more about how civil society can organize models for sharing, repairs, and second-hand initiatives.
Yeah, so thank you. So great to be here. So the title I was given was How Can the Civil Society Organize Models for Sharing, Repairs and Second-hand? And let's see which, är det högra pilen? Varför pratar jag Yeah, it is in English. That's right. Okay. I see all these Swedish faces in there. All right. And when I got this title, I was going to say something. Then we need to figure out, what could civil society do, and what could civil society organizations do. And to do that, we need to learn about experiments. And of course, in society, we're doing experiments. But if we are to learn about experiments, we should go to the most ruthless ones. What is the most ruthless? That's nature itself, of course. So I'm inspired here by the symbiosis, various types of symbiosis, and we'll discuss to what extent the activities of civil society organizations for renting and sharing and secondhand and so can be placed in various categories. You're the first mammals I test this on, so I want to see how it works. We'll start here. So it raises more questions than gives answers. So I'm going to give you examples of 5 or 6 types of symbiosis. The first one is mutualism. That's the nice one where, is it vad heter det, humla or, yeah, what is it? Bumblebee, yes. And there is a win-win, to use cheesy economics terms, between the insect and the flower, of course. And this is the nice and kind way. I should say also, nature is amoral and doesn't care about morality. Of course, we do, and we should do. So this is, but in our view in society, this goes from very kind and nice and to ruthless on the other side. So we have mutualism, where there's win-win. Then we have the one that I think is the cutest type of collaboration between, for instance, CSOs and firms, and that's the commensalism. You see the squirrel lives in the tree. The tree doesn't care, it doesn't do anything good or nothing bad, it's just, okay, that's fine. And this is a way that organizations could relate to each other as well. I'm going to explain how. Then we have the competition, of course. They compete for nutrition and sun and what have you. And there, you can find that relationship, of course. It's a main type of relationship between firms, but also between firms and non-governmental organizations in sharing. Then we have parasitism, where one creature lives in the mouth of the poor fish. The fish survives, but is suffering, but still can make it, and you can translate that into organizations and firms as well, as I will show. And then we have predation. In my view, when I saw this, what do you call it, Planet Earth movie, and the most heartbreaking scene was when the ice bear did not manage to chase, for her little ones, chase the seals. So I don't think it's that sad, but there can be that relationship between organizations as well. So what examples do we have here? Mutualism. You can have sharing organizations that collaborate with a sports club, and they synchronize and help each other out in the sharing activities. You can have, when it comes to car sharing, it's very common with car sharing co-ops that have a deal with a rental firm in case they run out of cars, so that it's always safe for the co-op members to have a car. That's mutualism. You also have when university signals that it collaborates with the CSO in sharing and so on, and that's really good for the reputation of the university. They show that they are i framkant and are pro students and thinking about students' limited resources. Then we have commensalism, where they coexist. It could be that CSOs agree on different segments of sharing or what have you, renting and so on. So they're fine. Don't care so much about each other. Then we have the municipality can lend out useless buildings to CSOs, for instance, that would not be used anyway. Or it could be that CSOs and firms that they have separate customers or products as well. Then we move to competition. That could be CSOs competing for funding and members. I mean, CSOs, they also need to survive and prosper, and there's a lot to compete for there, for better or worse. Then we have firms that can take shares, so to speak, from a CSO, but that they still coexist, so that there is kind of a balance, that they're both for-profit and non-profit activities, but the firms could take some shares there. When it comes to parasitism, we have there could be the municipality that benefits by hosting CSOs. It's good for their reputation and the moral capital and so on, but they don't help the CSO enough. So the CSO is suffering somehow because it doesn't get the support it needs. It could also be a CSO that exploits a firm's costly marketing or sharing. I'm trying to do this both ways. Some of these examples are quite weird and absurd, but it's just to not make a moral out of it. And then we go to predation, and that's it could be CSOs that merge into one CSO, and you can wonder who is eating whom. I mean, whose values is it that will dominate over the other ones? But the most discussed type of predation would be perhaps where a firm steals a CSO's sharing concept and turn members into clients, and the CSO disappears. And that can, sure, it can look violent and so on, but it could also be that the big firm takes over a small firm. But we should also ask, does this, the feelings it makes us, sense. We could discuss here whether it matters that organizations live and die or develop or change their direction, or if it's the main important thing is that the good sharing ideas and practices live on in different ways and turn from niche to mainstream. So that's what that would be fun to discuss here with you. All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. You said that this was the first group of mammals that you were going to test.
Yeah.
How do you think it went?
I don't know. Maybe they will.
How do you think it went, mammals? Good. Just a really quick question. This all sounds a bit cutthroat. What's the most difficult thing about finding this optimal balance? I think you call it very scientifically the cutest form of symbiosis, mutualism. What's the most difficult thing about finding this happy medium that would benefit all?
Yeah, it's that it's not all. It sounds simple. We find a deal that it's good for both of us. It could be a firm and a CSO, but that's not enough for us to be happy. Sure, both can win, but if one wins far more than the other, then it does not feel good, and the one who only benefits a little bit is frustrated and feels exploited, even though it's better off. So that's to find balance between the wins in the win-win. That's really tough.
Great, thank you.
All right.
I think the next speakers are an example of this happy medium. I'd like to welcome to the stage Circle Center Lund, Alice Iniatelli and Andre Wismar. You were both students and volunteers at Circle Center Lund. You both work as volunteers there. Please tell us more about how you were challenging traditional ideas of ownership and your plans to scale up your operations. Warm applause.
Hello, and thank you for coming, for being here, for supporting us. We're Circle Center. I'm Alice. I'm the events officer currently. This is Andre. He's a partnerships officer currently. And Circle Center started in 2018 as an outcome of a competition called Climathon, which was hosted by Climate Kick at the time, and people come together to try to find a solution to climate-related challenges. And some students came together and came up with this idea of Circle Center, and it was further supported by a hands-on university program, which helped them develop this idea further to its current form today, where we have our board, some of which are here, which provide that consistency throughout the years, and the officers that rotate every year. We're 2 of them, but we have 6 more? Yeah. Yeah, so we have different ways that we try to share goods, ideas, and skills. How do we do that? So 3 main ways. One is our core operation as the Library of Goods. Andrew will explain how that works in a little bit. We also have a common workspace. We're in a place called Stenkrossen, a bit south from here, and it's, Lund municipality owned. And we also host educational events where we mostly make use of that common workspace, and we'll talk about those as well.
So now, there's a couple of items that you could borrow in our library of things. So the question is, how many times have you been making pasta by yourself? Or how many times have you been trying a new sport, such as rollerblading? How many times have you had friends over who just needed a bike for a day or 2? So we really try to fight overconsumption and try to motivate people to not buy things unnecessarily, which they only use once or twice a year, but that they come to our library of goods so that they can rent it for a given amount of time. So yeah, we really try to answer the question, why do we why do we only use things on a sporadic basis when we then own them on a longer term? So we try to shorten basically, or change the habit of buying things and just using them for a short term. Now you're wondering, how does this work? It's very easy. You go online and then you find a catalog of items and then you select what you want to rent. So talking about pasta, if you're getting hungry, it's past 6, so there's a pasta making machine. So next time you think about making pasta from scratch, Circle Center Lund has a pasta making machine. So you just look for it if it's available, and then you can rent it for a small fee. We charge we ask for a deposit, which you'll get back once you return the item in good shape. We also accept Swish, so just, and then, yeah, this is what it looks like. When we're open, we are open 2 days a week, during which opening hours you can go collect the items or return it. And with this, I give back to Alice.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is our main operation. It's a library of goods. And we also have our events. That's what I try to organize this year. This is an example of an event. It's in partnership with Repair Cafe Lund, where we invite people to bring items that they own and that aren't working anymore and fix them as opposed to buying a new one. So yeah, and that way we maintain things in the economy for longer. Another example of a community event we host is our famous clothes swap, very popular among students here in Lund, where your currency is your used clothes, and with that you shop, not really, you swap with other people's used clothes. That way you circulate clothes, you have an exciting new closet, you don't need to go out shopping for it, you can just, exchange with other people in your community. And all these events are open to the community, which I think is an important aspect of Circle Center. And now the question of how to scale up. I think this is a really important question that we've been thinking about in our meetings. One option is more space, which means more inventory. And another option is more people, or not option, but more avenues. And a lot of times these are in combination if we find a different space that can allow for more foot traffic, which is something that other libraries of goods have found, is that when you're in a place that has more visibility, you're able to target people that aren't in this eco bubble, or in our case, it's very eco-oriented student bubble. So we're trying to open that niche to target other groups, such as young families in Lund. And for that, that idea of more people is also connected to more space, because in order to target such groups, you need space for bulkier things, so like cargo bikes for the kids or strollers and these sorts of things. So, but when we are thinking about how to scale up, and when we're talking about a really necessary change in how we consume things, it's important not just talk about our initiative here in Lund, but also about scaling up in different places. The map's not showing up, no. Okay, so up there it was written how to scale up, and there was a world map, and that's where we are. So can this initiative that we started not too long ago occur in other places, in other contexts, with other types of support? And the answer is yes. Oh, now it shows up. So Emily Silva is right here. She's doing her thesis research on libraries of things, and she found 90 libraries of things so far of the same nature as ours, so that rent a bunch of different types of items, as Andre mentioned before. And if you consider those that also rent tools and toys that are more niche specific, there it goes to the hundreds. So it's a really growing concept. These are the main 3 locations that they were found. And so the answer is yes, it can happen in other places. It is scalable, and it takes different shapes and forms depending on what place we're looking at. What's really interesting is that, or really exciting, is that all these libraries of things have a very open approach to sharing how to do this, how to approach in their own place. They have a very sort of inclusive language, and they also have created regional networks of, you're in Germany, this is your network of libraries of things in Germany, for example. So that being said, it's pretty scalable as it is now, but we have to remember this started basically around 10 years ago, right? And most of them in the past couple of years, really. So the scaling up will evolve throughout time. And the message we want to leave with you today, the big picture stuff. Firstly, we believe that the world is undergoing a mindset change. I think everyone here agrees that the way we consume things are overdue, and they're absolutely outdated with our new conditions. So initiatives like ours, like the Repair Cafe, like other initiatives, there's so many here in Lund alone in the world. There goes so many different options of how we can consume things different, how we can relate to objects differently. And living a value-driven life is becoming more and more possible. These initiatives are an example of that. Furthermore, we believe our circular economy is a social economy. We cannot think about we can't not equate circularity to sustainability without considering that social pillar. That's a fundamental part. It's changing how people relate to each other. It's changing how we relate to things. So that's a core part of what we believe, and it's a core part of what we see the future to include. And furthermore, we are part of the solution. And it's not just Circle Center, it's not just libraries of things, it's everybody that's here thinking about how you can translate this new paradigm shift, this new mindset change into your own experiences, your own knowledge, your own everyday practice. That's us. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have one quick question for you before you leave. That's excellent. You're empowering communities, you're giving them knowledge and skills, and you're connecting communities as well. A question, you've mentioned that library of goods are scalable in different contexts, and it's being done. How do you think this could happen in another place that doesn't have as much support or funding as Circle Center Lund has?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So according to Emily's research, she's really helped me a lot in this presentation, so credits to her. This can take different shapes in different places. A lot of them have aligned themselves with public libraries, sort of as an add-on service. A lot of them work as NGOs, as Circle Center does. And the London one is developing a new business model where it's somewhere between a nonprofit, it's between a for-profit and an NGO in some ways. So this is a very new thing that's starting to evolve in different directions. But overall, I would really recommend speaking to Emily.
Emily, can you just raise your hand one more time? Thank you.
Yeah, she's doing all this research, so.
So finding the connections, making the contacts.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
The final presentation of the evening before we have a panel discussion will be about sufficiency and scaling down mass consumption. Please welcome Ola Persson. He is a PhD candidate at KTH, Royal Institute of Technology. Welcome.
There we go. Right. So I will talk about sufficiency as a way of scaling down mass consumption. I'm a bit too early. So I think it kind of nicely ties in with the previous presentation in the sense that I think there's some overlap between the circular economy and sufficiency, but there are some important differences, I think, too, but depends a little bit of how you define the circular economy. But maybe we should start with defining what sufficiency is. And this is quite interesting. This is from the latest IPCC report. It's from the Summary for Policy Makers. So basically saying sufficiency policies are a set of measures and daily practices that avoid demand for energy, materials, land, and water while delivering human well-being for all within planetary boundaries. It's footnote number 60, so if you're curious, it's quite dug in there, but I think this is really captures quite well what the idea and behind sufficiency. And yeah, I think it's also very interesting that this kind of discussion around sufficiency policies has reached the level of the IPCC. And then just kind of maybe make it a bit more tangible what sufficiency is, as I understand it, as a researcher and who's kind of using this as a core concept. I think this illustration is quite helpful in the sense that, all right, clearly there's industrial countries, including Sweden, that is way above our carrying capacity that we're using. The materials, our consumption is basically is overshooting planetary boundaries in numerous different ways. And at the same time, you have emerging countries, majority countries in the global south that are really not meeting their very basic needs. So this is this idea of maybe converging at the center here, where we kind of respect the environmental ceiling, but at the same time, make sure that everyone have their basic needs met. So clearly this idea of sufficiency entails sort of justice, but it also entails a different understanding of well-being, because typically the conventional way we understand well-being or happiness is that the more we consume, the happier we become. But sufficiency takes a different approach on how we can foster well-being. So I think this is kind of, it's kind of at its core. And what comes with that is, of course, then also challenging the consumer culture that we are sort of situated within. And then a little bit, okay, why sufficiency? And in this context, I should say that also connecting back to Annika's presentation about the different numbers, I think, of course, when it comes to material goods, the CO2 footprint is maybe not so high, but it has other adverse environmental impacts. And I think this is the basic idea. Sufficiency is not only about CO2 emissions, it's also about other environmental impacts. But anywho, so why sufficiency? So I think this is just a recent report from RISE, and yes, as you can see, it's only 3.4% of the resources Sweden uses are cycled back in the economy. And I think at a global level, it's about 8.6%. And what they did in this report is that they developed 5 different scenarios, and they combined them, and together they estimated that about 7.6% of the resources that we use for economy could be recycled or put back into the economy. But these were very ambitious scenarios. So even under very ambitious scenarios, we're still very far away from a circular economy. So then this idea, we need to have a circular economy, but that also means that we also need to reduce our material consumption in order to facilitate that circulation of materials and so on and so forth. So I think this is where kind of sufficiency really comes into play. And yeah, just going back to, I think it's just fascinating to reflect on the language that is used in the IPCC report, and basically it's more of it's actually really a call for sufficiency or connecting sufficiency by saying that consumption reductions, both voluntary and policy-induced, can have positive and double dividend effects on efficiency, as well as reductions in energy and material use. but not necessarily at the expense of well-being. But this is, again, important. This is really speaking at the sort of affluent parts of the world, but not only affluent parts of the world, but also affluent communities and individuals. So this is the how and sort of why and how sufficiency, or yeah, this is about sufficiency, why we should talk about it. So then connecting a little bit of how we can enable it. And this is built on the research that I've been doing within this program. So these are 3 different kind of case studies. And again, this kind of connects back to what we've been talking about today is about the need to repair things. And one of those cases that I looked in was the campaign that the Swedish Society for Nature Conservation, Naturskyddsföreningen, which is here today, launched. But I think also connecting back to the idea of the social economy, the circular economy, and sufficiency, that how this campaign was formulated was not only about repairing things, taking care of things, it was also about creating a social inclusion, doing things together with others. So it's not only about this very instrumental way of looking at repair, I need to fix things, you do it together with people as a way of creating sort of well-being. So it has that sort of playing on those kind of 2 different ideas. And I should say this was a 3-year campaign, which was both about giving inspiration to how to repair your things, but also setting up like temporary collective repair spaces. And then the second case is this Fixotek, which maybe most of you have heard about, which is 4 different open do-yourself repair spaces in the city of Gothenburg, which city of Gothenburg is running in 3 cases, and then the 4th one, they do it in collaboration with an NGO. And again, connecting back to this idea of sufficiency, it's like, yes, this is a place for repairing things and lowering your material input or output, but it's also a space for getting to know each other, to learn together. And importantly, it's free of charge, so you can kind of go there and just to hang out, basically, if you want to. And the third one, which is maybe the one that, well, one of my favorites, or maybe one I think is the closest to this idea of sufficiency, is this idea of work time reduction. And then I looked at one of specific policy at the city of Gothenburg, which basically says that they implemented the policy in 2015, which allowed everyone who were employed by the city to reduce their work time down to 50%, irregardless of the motive. So then this gave another possibility for the employees to actually go down in their working hours. And I think this is one of these interesting policies that not only can give you increased well-being, but it gives you more time to do these practices like repair, which takes a lot of time, and we don't have the time to do so. So I think this policy, you could say, is, in my opinion, is that it can enable many of those kind of slower and more sustainable consumption practices that we have discussed in this program. So I think that was it for me. I don't have a thank you one, so I say thank you and additional reading here.
But we can thank you. Thank you. You mentioned that there are several sufficiency-related initiatives in Sweden.
Yes.
What would you like to see more of?
Well, I do think this work time reduction was really interesting. I think it's maybe sometimes it is sort of seen as utopian, but there's actually a lot of ongoing initiatives in Swedish municipalities where they're testing it, also not only inside of Sweden, but also in Spain and Iceland, to kind of rethink our idea what work and the good life is. So I think keep sort of at that initiative and see what we can learn from it.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Ola.
Thank you. And I did have a thank you sign.
There it is. Thank you. We're now moving forward to the panel discussion. And the question we'll be addressing is, how can the discussed models be scaled up and become more mainstream? So I would like to welcome back Oksana Montt, André, thank you. And then we have a new face joining us, Peter Abrahamsson Lindeblad, Circular Business Designer at Inca Global Circular Innovation Team and part of IKEA's retail organization. thank you for joining us today. Peter, could you tell us more about your role as a circular business designer and how your organization is working to upscale sustainable furnishing?
Yeah, sure, Erica, I can do that. Yeah, thanks. It's an honor to be here. Really nice. Great presentations we've had so far. What was said was that I'm a business designer at Inca, which is one of the retailers of the IKEA organization. I'm sitting in the Circular Innovation team, which is super interesting. And the focus of our work is to try to understand people's pains and needs in their everyday life and try to address that in a circular way with providing circular solutions for them. And then when we talk about solutions, working with innovation, you always have to think about if this is actually solving a problem for a person. If not, there is no desirability. You also have to consider if you actually can do this thing in a feasible way so that it works out. Do you have the capabilities? Can you do it efficiently? And eventually you also have to figure out if this solution is viable. So does it have a long-term profitability? We're talking about, I think Mikael was onto this win-win thing. So it has to be a win for the users and a win for the company. So what does that mean in practice is that in the last years, we've been spending a lot of time trying to understand some things around basically two different areas. One has to do with the second-hand market. So how do we interact with that one? How can we enable it? What part can we play in that? And the other big thing is about producer ownership. So how can we in some way provide access to use for people instead of them having to buy it? So everything around leasing, rental and subscription, how do we make that come to life? Yeah, some examples of things we've been experimenting with in the last years is, for instance, we have a shop at Retuna, as you know. We have tested repair services. We have tested decluttering services. We are working on a product as service solution. And we also set up a local recovery hub in Malmö where we take things back and refurbish them and make sure they end up in a better place than a landfill.
You mentioned that you're actually looking at what consumers have for problems and what they're asking for, what solutions they're asking for. Are these examples of what the consumer is asking for?
Yeah, maybe. It depends on how you see it. You have to try to understand the problems that people have. Our vision is to provide a better everyday life for the many people. So you need to understand what the problem in the daily life is before you try to create a solution.
Have you found the problems?
We have found some problems that we have been trying to address. 3, actually.
Okay, what are those 3 problems?
The first one is about ownership. So people have increasingly a problem with owning things. It carries a lot of pains and burdens and so on. So they prefer to access things. So you can see that happening in many fields like transport, clothing, food, and so on. The second one is about awareness that things do come from somewhere. They have a value, and I want to make sure that it gets its best life. So I want to be involved in that process. And the third problem is about clutter. So you have too many things. The problem is not that you don't have stuff, you have too much stuff. So those are the 3 problems we've been focusing on in the last years.
Okay. We're talking about sustainable business models for home furnishing and how they can be scaled up and mainstreamed. Circle Center Lund, you've touched about it in your presentation about what that would look like. What would scaling up be for your organization? We see that you're on your way.
Yeah, we try. So for us, scaling up is really motivating more people to rent items rather than purchasing it. And B, it's also the geographical or ease of access for a center like that. So yeah, we're lazy people, right? So it needs to be easy and it needs to be quick. So how can we prolong opening hours? How can we make it accessible for people? Can we use technology for people to access, for example, some kind of locker system? Or so we're looking into different opportunities or possibilities how we can make it easier for people to access these items. So it's A, spreading the idea, and B, make it as easy as possible for consumers so that it becomes the default.
Oksana, is this in line or does this differ from your picture? Peter's told us about his initiatives in scaling up sharing. For example, is this in line with your picture of what scaling up is and what needs to be done?
I think in some ways, yes, of course. When I'm thinking about scaling up, it's both making IKEA is a big company, so this is a way to go big, introduce these ideas of repair, upcycle into a big system. Or another way is to go multiplying. We want to see many of the circle centers around Sweden and around the world. We want to see the tuna in every municipality. So it's not going big and having one company like IKEA, which covers big ground, of course, but then we can see the localized solutions everywhere. And there was many presentations interesting, and then I was thinking, yeah, Circle Center. Then I was thinking that we looked at sharing economy in Australia, and there they have a huge network, 230 organizations, toy sharing libraries, for example, and they've been going on for more than 20 years. Also, incidentally, there is something called Men's Shed. So the repair, also a huge network. So there, and these two collaborate, some of them, which is a kind of sharing opportunity, but also with the repair service.
Did you call it a man shed?
A men's shed.
Man's shed.
For men, I don't know if women are allowed, but it's a man's
I really
shed.
hope women are allowed. That has tools.
It has tools.
Electric tools that make lots of noise.
Do-it-yourself tools, yeah. They rumble, and so
they rumble.
They rumble. So that's a third way to go, kind of to scale up. It's still small and local, but they are united in the association national scale.
But there's also a history of it. If it was established 20 years ago and they've been growing and now have 230, where we're looking at 90 initiatives here in Sweden,
Right.
There's potential. There's also kind of a roadmap to see how we can move forward. I'd like to go back to Michael Klintman. We're talking about mutualism. Peter, you're on the board of Circle Center Lund.
Yes.
Yes, you are. And you've given them the benefit of your knowledge and your experience. Does it go both ways? Have you learned anything from your participation in Circle Center Lund that you've brought back with you?
I mean, that's just, I'm just there for personal reasons. It doesn't have anything to do with my professional situation. But I mean, it's, of course, there's so many interesting things to learn from that kind of solution or the way people behave. I'm mostly interested in understanding the way people see things and think about those things, and that also somehow is a sign of some type of challenge you have in life. So how can we address that one as well? But I'm just really there for the fun of it. I think it's really inspiring.
It's inspiring. So there is something that you are taking back with you.
Yes, inspiration.
Inspiration.
Yeah.
Well, then I have to go. I'm still on Michael Klintman and the mutualism and how cutthroat it can be. And you had the polar bear up there, and you thought, oh, but is it really so sad? Is it okay for a CSO to die or be eaten up by a larger corporation if it feeds to the greater good? Is it, okay. We have these bottom-up initiatives. They're doing great things. They're inspiring bigger operations. Earlier in the day, we were seeing how Oatly was bought up, had a different ownership change, and where they can now possibly, potentially influence a larger company to do greater good. Is it okay for these bottom-up initiatives to be eaten up if it can be scaled up, if Retuna can be found in every municipality?
Are you looking at me? I think that maybe if this kind of behavior was mainstream and scaled up, there wouldn't be a need for a CSO in that area. So maybe if CSOs are dying, maybe it's a sign of success that we actually all changed somehow. Sometimes you talk about in big organizations that you have a sustainability department doing sustainability stuff. What if that was all spread out? Then maybe it's sitting in the DNA of the whole organization. And if we look at the society in the same way, if that mainstream behavior is mainstream, maybe then the CSO has actually succeeded somehow. So maybe not. It's very philosophical, but that could be the case.
Could be the case. Thank you.
Can I step in?
Yes.
Because I agree with you, but then there is a big if. And if comes from our research looking at sharing economy, where we all know it's all started nice and beautiful, people sharing stuff, coming to neighbors to borrow an egg or sugar or whatever, and then it all blew up into Uber and Airbnb, and so the soul of sharing has changed somewhat. And it's not to say that they are big and bad, because we also see fantastic work they're doing with now Ukrainian refugees, with earlier with Corona, where they are really helping. So it's not to blame them, but I'm talking about this nature of sharing and the goodness, and sort of there is some sort of cuteness in the small things in the local networks. So this is a bit about if the notion is changing, then maybe the big ones, they shouldn't be called. In that case, I'm thinking sharing. They are something else. They are platforms, providing services and so on, and then the sharing bit should be, the name should stay on the local to preserve this kind of the original idea.
The original idea. Well, we're into it, and I think I'm going to ask the same question I asked last time. Profit. How important is long-term, short-term profit for businesses and sustainable business models? You've talked about how you need support in funding. You're finding new markets or ways to make more money off of the same product longer. How important is profit?
Yeah, I can answer. I think we were onto it before in the last session as well. I think it's for it to be viable over a long time, for it to work in the capitalistic system we discussed before lunch. I think it has to be profitable in some way, in some aspect. Maybe not in the same way. Maybe the way we measure success is one of our barriers as well. Maybe there's different types of profit, not only monetary, maybe something else is there as well. But I think in the long run, for these things to replace existing business models, they also need to be profitable. Because we're taking away some business models that are linear and no longer work. We have to replace them with something that is equally beneficial.
When you say linear, you mean that things are coming out and going out quickly. You want them to stay in the cycle.
Yeah.
I think we're going to open the floor for questions. Are you curious? Oh, you have the microphone there already. Thank you. Are there any questions for the panelists? There at the back. So if you could just answer, just pose your question shortly, that'd be great.
But many big companies, if you have, you know, children work in many companies, like doing clothes, many, we can just stop children work in the clothes industry. Children work.
Child labor.
Sorry, could you just
Child labor.
turnover?
Child labor.
Child labor in
clothing
home furnishings
industry.
or clothing.
Big issue, hard to control, especially for individual countries. We need international agreements. We need systems to implement, for example, with audits. I know many years back we worked with the Indiska, and they were telling about the sustainability manager was on the road more than 200 days a year visiting all the farms, all the small producers, to check that they are in compliance with their own code of conduct. But it's all about, I mean, looking at the big producers, big companies, how many suppliers and how global our supply chains are. I guess we also need the countries where this happens to step up at some point, because it's very hard from our countries, Western countries, who are so far away from where things are actually produced, to make sure that this is not happening. And I don't think any company can say that we are sure that this is not happening. It's extremely complex systems we are dealing with. So I think there is a lot of will and willingness to address this issue, but the reality, it's very difficult.
I have a question. In IKEA, you mentioned that there's some problems related to this transition that the new business models try to tackle, like the things you said with ownership and things like that. And I'm wondering if being driven by consumer demand or sort of filling consumer gaps is enough for the company of the future. And whether, in your position, in your understanding, being sustainability oriented and sort of shaping the future consumer in that way makes more sense.
Let me see. If I understand the question correctly, the question is if we should somehow try to influence consumer behavior in the more sustainable way.
Yeah, in a way. So, like, by filling gaps of this consumer of the future, it is still consumer oriented, which makes sense for any business to be consumer oriented. But it's still, I'm wondering if that's enough for the challenges that we have today, because humans are it's so easy to consume. It's so easy to feed into a linear economy and into using resources way too much. So I'm wondering if it would, what is your experience, and if there's a conversation about not just catering to a new eco-friendly consumer, but also changing your entire company also to what's not visible for the consumer, to be sustainability oriented.
Yeah, I mean, you can work on that from many angles, and I think the first thing is to understand where consumers are heading. So where are we going? What kind of trends and what kind of changing behaviors are already there? And then I think that by tapping into whatever those changes are, many people still like to just buy things. They don't really reflect a lot. They want convenience. They want it to be, they're programmed by habit. We're all sort of grew up in a society where this is the norm, which is in itself quite amazing. But if you try to tap into those needs, that is about maybe not the concern for environment or sustainability, but still sort of the normal habit, and you still give them a solution that is circular or something, but still as convenient, then you sort of influence them in one way. So you make the more sustainable choice as convenient or as affordable or as whatever as possible, and then you still convert people to living more sustainable without them even being interested in that as such. So I think that's definitely something that we need to think about, and I think that is also about scaling, because if we make those solutions very accessible to many people, we can also reach people that maybe don't care as much about what their behavior is doing. So yeah.
Oksana, do you have anything to add?
I keep thinking about first the role of policymakers. Maybe it's boring to bring it up now, but a lot of what is happening in society is set up by our regulatory frameworks within which companies operate. And the companies innovate, but it's the role of policymakers to set the standard. This is okay, this is the norm, these are our goals. And then the business comes up in and innovates. So we shouldn't forget the role of policymakers, but also what is the norm in society is also shaped very much by media, by TV channels, by social media and so on. And I think there was this program now on the TV where people come and bring their stuff for repairs, and then they make this beautiful. And I would think, oh, finally, we've been talking about this for 25 years, now it's out there. And it's this, and it becomes then people see how people react to the things being renewed or upscaled or repaired, and then it creates a norm in society, and then it's much easier than for companies to steer in the sustainable direction. It doesn't become so awkward and strange.
Yeah, maybe if I can add, what we try also to do at the Circle Center is to cater, as Alice said, to cater to young families so that it becomes normal for kids to see that their parents or their friends' parents have borrowed something, maybe for a weekend or for a week, so they don't develop this idea of, oh, it's only cool if I own it, but it's normal and cool if I can return it and then in 2 weeks maybe rent something with a different color. Or so we try to establish or generate an idea of what is normal already from a beginning, but that's a long-term goal for us. Yeah.
Is there another question here? In the middle there.
I was just, now that we are talking about consumer change and consumer behavior, I was just interested in hearing from the panel, thinking about this societal element of often CSOs, that how companies can help to steer this kind of sharing feeling, or this kind of, that you mentioned, Oksana, the essence of sharing, the values behind it, because going back to the question that we had before about what happens if the CSO got eaten up, what happens to the societal part, and how can we prevent this from happening?
Oh, that was hard. Yeah, do you want to go first?
No, I'm just, is there a space for both? Can there be symbiosis of some sort? I didn't remember all the definitions and terms, but I mean, like, there is a room for big platforms. I'm thinking sharing. There is a room for big platforms, but also very much a need for local. They fulfill, I think, different functions. Is that my point before was the terms and the definitions shouldn't be eaten up. If it is, they can borrow the idea and call it something else, and then people know what it is, but don't kind of borrow the term as well and lose the soul. That's a bit different from what you wanted to say.
No, yes, and I think that there are things that you can require companies to do that will enable people to make up their own sharing ideas, like Circle Center or whatever, sharing between peers to peers, neighbors. One example that I really think is important is that we need to, any producer should be a lot more transparent around what is actually sitting in the things they're producing. So where does it come from? What is it made of? How do you repair it? What things do you need to do this? And also let people build onto that story. So what if there was a passport on each and everything, which was like an open source. This is where it comes from, this is where it's been, this is what is the value I can expect from it, this is the way I can get services, this is the way I can share it with neighbors and so on. So I think there's enablers that producers can be required and asked to do, but maybe those enablers should be up for grabs for people to make up their own sharing story around. So there's both and, I think, like you there, both hands. Yeah, thank you, both hands.
That's a good idea. I mean, passport, that's kind of technical and all there, but then we can plug in the personal stories. I had this scarf for so many years and I've used it in this, so I got it in these romantic circumstances, or it saved my life or whatever, it covered me from cold. And then, you know, when it comes to a second-hand store, then somebody picks up this, and this is not just a piece of clothes, but it's something, it's a story. But then also, I was thinking about your question back, and then one is what companies can be doing, and another one is what other type of companies can be doing is the real estate. How we build, what we build, do we have space for sharing in Segge Park or Brunshög or whatever the new constellations are or districts are popping up. So it's a big role for urban planners, I guess, to plan this for the future. People, we all have more and more stuff. We cannot even find that stuff at home. So there should be this space for exchange. There should be also some, maybe there are some in Bostadsrättsföreningen and all these housing associations. Sometimes there is a repair room, there is maybe a caretaker who can help and show. But then it has to be scaled up or become a norm. Why not a new standard? I mean, there were standards for energy efficiency when buildings are built or these washing rooms are installed. So it could be similar for repair space for sharing. For exchange.
So in our living, in the apartment buildings that we're living, that there should be ample space for us to exchange, repair things.
Yeah.
I'd like that. I'd appreciate that a lot. Are there any more questions from the audience? Yes, there, and then at the back.
Hey, I had one question also related to the big versus small and global versus local. So we heard some of the problems with global supply chains, and I'm wondering also about then the resilience value to having small and local, and whether that's something that maybe not just policymakers, but maybe policymakers or municipalities on the local level should also be involved, and that it doesn't necessarily mean that then these organizations need to be for profit, but maybe have then public value that should be supported by municipalities, both for resilience and this community factor.
Very important question, huh? Both with Corona and with wars, and now we realize that we've created this huge globalized world. It was fun for a while, but now it's not so fun anymore. And then looking at what Sweden is self-sufficient in, carrot and onion and potatoes, and that's it. And or thinking about Kivik with 52 types of apples, and then looking at the choice in store or 5 or 6. I think it's really a good question, Jessica, that we need to rethink. And this brings me back to, we had 10 years ago, we had a Spread 2050 project, Sustainable Lifestyles, EU project, where we had this, one of scenarios was the local loops. So now I think we need to go back to very resilient and local loops. on so many different levels.
Yeah,
Andre.
and maybe from our side, yeah, we also try to, so in addition, we explained the Library of Things, but that's just one of our activities. So we really try to offer space and also time and knowledge that people come together and exchange know-how so that we can, that we value like art or an experience more than owning things. So I believe we as a society or we as an organization and all of us as individuals also have a responsibility to live these different values and try to give value to experiences rather than to things.
Definitely.
Excellent. I think we have time for one last question, and I believe there was one at the back there. So empowering
and acting, yeah. I feel
empowering,
like
acting, learning new skills, or remembering and relearning old skills will take us a
Remembering
little bit
good
along the
stuff.
way. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the presentations and the presentation I'd like to refer to was the PhD candidate. I can't remember your name, but
Ola Pasha.
Olaf, thank you. Yeah, it's great. The graph, it would be interesting to see that the trend of the graph of wellness and consumption, but it seemed like you wanted to converge on what the USSR had somehow achieved, as far as I gathered. I may be mistaken, but what we were mentioning about challenging consumption patterns and attitudes, and we mentioned a philosophical attitude and capitalist structures. If we try to move away from individualist consumerism and move towards communal sharing models, you're drastically reducing consumers and consumption, which would fit the model that we saw in the graph. How does it look from, for example, a profit-driven company like IKEA? How do they reconcile themselves with moving away from economic growth, less consumption, less consumers? It's great that you have an arm of the company that is working on this.
So your question, could you just restate your question quickly?
The reconciliation between capitalist structures and communist ideals or sharing structures. How do you do that?
Ola is shaking his head here. He's not. He says that you can talk about it later if you like. Is that good? Great. Thank you very much for your questions, and thank you very much to the panelists and the presenters today. We are going to wrap it up. If you would like to learn more about the results of the research program Mistra Sustainable Consumption and the work they've been doing in food, home design, as well as vacationing, you are more than welcome to visit the website. Huh? No. Where you will find all reports, all videos, all information, and links to everything you could possibly want to know about. You are also more than welcome to follow us on the rest of this train journey. We will be having 4 more seminars like these in the upcoming 2 days. You can see all of the social media tags. You have everything you need to follow along. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for coming to us and visiting us here in the audience at Lund Stadsbibliotek. And thank you to you that have been watching from home. Hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you very much.